As of this moment, you could probably argue that Corey Graves is the most noteworthy real-life wrestling heel. He openly criticized the work of his colleague Mauro Ranallo on Twitter, badly affecting his mental health. Mauro's work isn't beyond criticism. The cultural references he crams into any NXT takeover are beyond parody at this point. So you're not wrong, Corey, you were just wrong to call him out publicly on social media for it like an arsehole. Want some more examples of real-life wrestling heels? Jim Cornette is making several enemies these days, and Vince McMahon remains the preeminent IRL wrestling heel by squandering multiple generations of incredible talent by instructing them to say a load of complete toss. But there's hope for 'em all yet, I tells ya, as this lot all prove. I'm Gareth from What Culture Wrestling, and here are 10 real-life wrestling heels who turned babyface. Number 10, Bruce Prichard was a heel because he aided and encouraged every last one of Vince McMahon's worst impulses in his role as Yes Man. He was loathed by countless WWE figures over the years, not least of which Stephanie McMahon, for his perceived tendency to blindly support his captain no matter what. He was considered a weasel by those same people for oozing his way beyond official channels and into Vince's ear. His work ethic was frequently questioned. He was also deeply deceitful, even by wrestling standards. How did he turn babyface? By being incredibly entertaining on Conrad Thompson's podcast, perversely and in earnest. His impressions were amusing, and the small details of trivia he offered were fascinating in spite of, and often because of, the overpowering stench of bullcrap which came with them too. Did you know that Vince McMahon devised the Muhammad Hassan character because he just felt so bad about the perception of Arab Americans post 9/11? Yeah, right, sure, Bruce. Thing is, Prichard is unfortunately now turning heel once again, having returned to WWE and overseeing SmackDown's descent into dire, repetitive comedy. Well, guess he's the new Big Show. Sorry about that. Number 9, Bob Holly was a heel because he beat the piss out of poor Matt Cappotelli on Tough Enough in an infamous and disturbing scene. He bust Cappotelli's lip and blackened his eye in the sort of metal testing practice that existed everywhere once upon a time, but was just shocking and ugly to witness on television. The screen literally brought this into focus, and Matt's sweetheart nature made him even more sympathetic. This was consistent with Holly's reputation as a liberty taker, which, contrasted with his ability and position on the card, compelled many to label him a cat-kicking idiot who took it out on the green and the nervous. How did he turn babyface? He was an idiot, but he was top bants, mate. It might just be because Holly has such an abrupt, angry comedic quality about him, but the likes of Edge and Frankie Kazarian often pop themselves when recalling their dealings with the man. Perhaps Holly was WWE's Albert Rosenfield, a proponent of tough love on a mission more noble than you or I can conceive: the sanctity of professional wrestling. Actually, come to think of it, Holly once called Michael Cole a word that rhymes with pit's head at WrestleMania. So was he ever really a heel? Number 8, John Cena was a heel because he seemed to revel in undermining certain opponents he felt weren't on his level. His matches all too often degenerated into farce when he transitioned into a comeback quicker than Masato Yoshino running the goddamn ropes. Virtually everybody with a deep voice hated John Cena for almost a decade, and this sentiment was shared by more than a handful of those in the back. Tyler Rex and Alex Riley, to use just 2 examples, accused Cena of career sabotage, and they weren't even given the infamous verbal massacre treatment. To top it all off, Cena was also a massive whiner in his program with The Rock, and ultimately a bit of a hypocrite. How did he turn babyface? Because wrestling fans are too quick to conflate the work with the performer, that blinding 2015 US title run did bring into focus the whole John Cena's a real hero we should cherish thing. Also, Cena did own up to his own hypocrisy, but then again he kinda had to, because he followed the exact same career trajectory. Then, when he eventually cycled himself out, he did start putting people over, except Baron Corbin, who he mercilessly killed, but that was probably for the best, eh? Number 7, Kevin Nash was a heel because he allegedly clipped Goldberg's wings in WCW, accelerating the demise of mainstream competition, and he definitely booked the finger poke of doom shortly thereafter, which all but formally allowed The Rock to set in. Thanks for that, Kev. When people mourned this butterfly effect, Nash laughed at those people for caring about vanilla midgets. He was considered by hardcore fans a bad wrestler because he lacked the requisite work rate, despite entering a string of fabulous performances with Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels and being very cool. He infected also the Summer of Punk in a bizarre development. But that wasn't his fault. Kevin Nash was never going to turn down a payday after all. How did he turn babyface? By becoming our woke king, being fabulously unfiltered on Twitter, creating several unforgettable shoot video memories, poking fun at his quad injuries, staying fiercely loyal to Scott Hall with an incredible persistence and devotion, heralding the unsung heroes of the working class, and ritually telling the haters to do one, to put it kindly. Number 6, Randy Orton was a heel because Randy Orton was tall. He was tall, handsome, and a total natural at his chosen profession, into which he had the clearest of paths as a third-generation wrestler. He was so effortlessly mechanically great that he spent much of the time most spend learning just being a complete goof-off jerk to fans. He was also a wellness policy violator who felt not 1 ounce of guilt over grabbing the shovel. Orton for many years was unprofessional and a consistent irritant. He also wrestled several countless tedious matches when he was demonstrably capable of more. How did he turn babyface? This is very contentious because he's still terrorizing off his personnel. But then again, he is very funny on Twitter, and in general a gift to most social media conversations. He tells Matt Riddle to do one and compliments Big E's chest. He'll do a job in the ring and won't give a toss about it, and openly adores his wife and fleet of children. The 2020 version of Randy is just more mature, and though his matches are still a bit dull, he's still extracting a great deal of ill-gotten money in the process. So go Randy. Number 5, Shawn Michaels was a heel because he was a troubled man who projected his issues onto an entire company. As the leader of the Clique faction, he applied a stranglehold over creative. And if you weren't pally with him, you were pretty much done for. His constant swipes at Bret Hart were perversely amusing, granted, but they cloaked the WWF in a toxic cloud. He threw a tantrum at Vader for stiffing him, and yet buried Sid for not doing anything in the same year of 1996. There was no pleasing the man, unless he devised a quick-witted hitman burial, which delighted him no end. How did he turn babyface? By helpfully thinning out the North American animal population. No, I'm kidding. He actually found God and elected to live a better life for his family and his soul. But this didn't matter quite as much as his outstanding pro wrestling matches which came after finding the Lord, obviously. Again, I'm joking, don't shoot. Either way, Michaels is now a much better man in the wake of finding God. Number 4, Will Ospreay was a heel because he once had the worst Twitter account out there. Ospreay's socials were the absolute worst. Ospreay at various points had to delete his Twitter account because his temperamental, misinformed trash was rejected by so many. His "When is it International Men's Day" tweet standing out as one of the true lowlights. How did he turn babyface? He was incredibly generous to Seth Rollins during their Twitter spat, proclaiming him to be an all-time great before gracefully bowing out. He advocates for mental health awareness. He also wrestles an arduous best-kept secret loop in Australia to help build the scene there, such as his devotion to his craft and his lesser-known peers. Really, he is the quintessential wrong and come good. Number 3, Edge was a heel because you do not bang another man's misses, no matter how tantalizing the brief flash of thong. It's just not cricket. But Edge chose to smash Matt Hardy's manhood over the boundary with a 6. Then Edge was rewarded with an absolutely awesomely entertaining main event run, while Paul Lita on the other hand was slut-shamed on her way out of the company. How did he turn babyface? Seriously, by just being tremendous at his craft. Edge was among the last of an old breed. He was a TV star who could do it all. He could work, he could talk, he could transcend WWE tropes with his outrageous character work and comedic instincts. A true master of all trades. This respect intensified when Edge was forced into a shock retirement by 2011. And now his quiet, improbable, magical return has brought that legacy back into focus. Number 2, Tony Schiavone was a heel because he was once actually loathed amongst hardcore wrestling fans. Tony Schiavone. Madness. His legendary "that'll put the butts in the seats" line was the instruction of producer Annette Yother, who told him to bury Mick Foley with whatever shovel he could conceive of. Schiavone was also pelted for losing his enthusiasm, and that was a bit like complaining that somebody smelled like crap when somebody else had covered him in crap. How did he turn babyface? By becoming the most beloved presence in the history of this great sport on AEW Dynamite, on which he marks out in his glorious anti-Matt Striker way, calls MJF a prick, dresses up like Orange Cassidy, genuinely fears for the safety of the talent, thus creating a tremendous sense of realism, and generally has the time of his life and expresses this with a sense of infectious wonder. Number 1, Triple H was a heel because Triple H was the absolute worst. His performance level plummeted to the depths of flabby, methodical hell at the time he was entrusted to carry everything. He used his backstage sway to both rip the piss out of talents with potential to star and ruin talents that already were stars. Trace all of recorded professional wrestling history, and you will never yield a record of such heat-devoid main events boasted by the man. And yet, it was Trips who told so many guys that they didn't know how to work. He also developed a totally bizarre habit in the early 2010s in which he'd blast emerging stars with his pedigree in dark segments. How did he turn babyface? His brain was big. Mighty big. In directing his sycophantic tendencies to the audience for once, he created NXT to ascend to savior status by studying the world beyond the WWE bubble and adapting its brilliance to the high-value production and effective promotion of the WWE machine. NXT has delivered to us some of the greatest storylines, matches, and yes, moments in the history of professional wrestling. So, thank you, I guess, Papa H. And that's our list. Know of any other real-life wrestling heels who turned babyface? Let us know all about them in the comment section right down below. And do not forget to like, share, click on that subscribe button, and ring the bell while you're there. Also, be sure to head on over to whatculture.com and click on some more articles just like the one this video is based on. I have been Gareth from What Culture Wrestling. Thank you very much for watching, and I'm sure I'll see you soon.